Urgent Las Vegas Raiders fans. Do not miss this. What just happened? You won't believe this one. But before we reveal the big news, make sure to subscribe to the channel, because here, we bring you daily videos with the latest Las Vegas Raiders updates. And to not miss anything, activate the notifications. Hey, Raiders Nation! Today, we're diving deep into some crucial news that's got everyone talking, particularly about the team's defensive line and what might be coming up in the near future. If you've been following the Raiders this season, you know that the defensive line has been a real point of concern, especially after some recent injuries and roster moves. So, let's get right into it. First, we've got an update on Christian Wilkins, the former Miami Dolphins star who was brought in last offseason with high expectations. Remember, the Raiders signed him to a hefty 4-year deal worth $110 million, with a staggering $82.75 million guaranteed. That's a huge investment, folks, and it showed how much the team believed in his ability to anchor their defensive front. Wilkins, as many of you know, is one of the league's top defensive tackles when healthy. His combination of power, technique, and football IQ makes him a nightmare for opposing offensive lines. But, unfortunately, things haven't gone entirely according to plan. Last year, the Raiders lost Wilkins early in Week 5 against the Denver Broncos, and he suffered a broken foot that kept him out for the rest of the season. It was a huge blow, not just for the team's morale but also for their defensive consistency. Imagine, you invest so heavily in a player like Wilkins, only to see him sidelined for the majority of the year. Since then, fans have been wondering, what's the current status of Christian Wilkins? Well, the latest reports from The Athletic's Tashan Reed suggest that Wilkins' recovery isn't moving as quickly as anyone hoped. During the offseason OTA period, he's been surprisingly absent from Phase 3 of team workouts, which is usually when players ramp up their participation. That's never a good sign when you're talking about a player who's supposed to be a cornerstone of your defense. And, just to add more context, head coach Pete Carroll recently described Wilkins' recovery process as difficult, which is a clear indication that he's still facing hurdles. For a 6-year veteran like Wilkins, who's proven to be one of the best in the league when healthy, this is a tough pill to swallow. But it also raises some serious questions about the Raiders' plans moving forward. If Wilkins' injury lingers into the season or if he's not at full strength come game time, the team might find themselves in a precarious situation. You see, the defensive line is critical for the Raiders' overall defensive scheme. If they can't rely on Wilkins, they need to have Plan B, C, and sometimes D ready to go. Now, this opens the door for some possible moves in the trade market or free agency, and that's where things get really interesting. If Wilkins' recovery stretches out, the Raiders might need to look elsewhere to shore up their interior defensive line. One name that's been floating around is Sebastian Day, a well-experienced player who spent 6 seasons in the NFL and won a Super Bowl with the Rams in 2021. Last year, Day was with the Tennessee Titans, where he posted 5 sacks and 44 tackles. While those aren't eye-popping numbers, his experience and leadership could be exactly what the Raiders need right now. The Titans, as many of you know, are in a bit of a rebuild. They've got a lot of young talent developing on their defensive front, like Tvondre Sweat, and Day might be on the trade block. And here's the kicker, if the Raiders decide to pursue him, they could potentially land Day for a late-round pick, maybe a 6th or 7th rounder, which would be a smart move if they're looking for immediate help without giving up too much draft capital. It's a move that could pay off, especially if Wilkins' health continues to be uncertain. Think about it, adding a veteran like Day, with his playoff experience and leadership qualities, could give the Raiders some stability up front, even if Wilkins isn't at 100%. Plus, Day's skill set complements the Raiders' defensive scheme, which has been leaning more on versatile, disruptive linemen to generate pressure. But let's not forget about the younger options, because the Raiders are also looking at their options in the draft and free agency to fill that void. One name that's been discussed in NFL circles is Jonathan Smith, a young defensive tackle with promise, drafted in the first round last year. Smith has shown flashes of potential, but he hasn't quite lived up to expectations yet. He's recorded just 2 sacks and 54 tackles over his 34 career games, and with the Cowboys adding veteran Solomon Thomas in the offseason, the team might be willing to part ways with Smith if they receive a good offer. For the Raiders, acquiring a young, talented player like Smith could be a gamble worth taking, especially if they're looking for long-term solutions. Another interesting name to keep an eye on is Matt Hurst, a player who's been with the Raiders before. Drafted in the 5th round in 2018, Hurst had a promising start but then saw his production dip, leading to his release. Last year, he bounced back with a solid performance, earning a career-high PFF grade of 81.0 in 2023. He's a cheap, veteran option that could slot right into the rotation if the Raiders need depth or a stopgap solution. And considering the current salary cap situation, bringing back Hurst makes a lot of sense. He's familiar with the system, and he's been a reliable rotational piece when called upon. Now, let's zoom out a bit and look at the bigger picture here. The Raiders are in a bit of a transitional phase. They've been trying to rebuild their defense, improve their overall competitiveness, and set the stage for a potential playoff run. But injuries and roster uncertainties have thrown some curveballs. The defensive line, which is so crucial in today's NFL, where pass rushers are king, has been a bit inconsistent. Max Crosby, the star pass rusher, has been doing his part, but he can't do everything alone. The interior pressure, the run-stopping ability, that's where the battles are often lost or won. And, speaking of Crosby, he's been one of the most consistent players on the team, often drawing double teams and still managing to rack up impressive stats. Last season, Crosby recorded over 12.5 sacks, which is phenomenal. But even he needs support from the middle to unleash his full potential. That's why the health of Wilkins, Joseph Day, or any alternative the Raiders bring in is so vital. The team's defensive identity relies heavily on a stout, disruptive interior line that can collapse pockets and stop the run effectively. If they can get that unit healthy and playing at full tilt, the Raiders could see a significant boost in their overall defense. Another angle to consider is the coaching staff and their approach to developing this unit. Defensive coordinator Patrick Graham has a reputation for innovative schemes and aggressive play calling. His success hinges on having the right personnel up front. So, if Wilkins' injury persists, the Raiders might need to adapt quickly, possibly shifting to more of a hybrid scheme that emphasizes edge rushing and linebacker play, rather than relying solely on dominant interior pressure. And let's not forget the importance of the draft here. The upcoming NFL draft is shaping up to be a critical event for the Raiders, especially on the defensive front. They'll be looking for young talent to add depth and long-term solutions. Given their current roster and the injury concerns, drafting a high-upside defensive tackle or adding a versatile defensive lineman could be a game-changer. It's all about building a resilient, flexible unit that can withstand injuries and keep the team competitive week after week. Now, I want to touch a bit on the team's overall outlook for the upcoming season. The Raiders, coming off a somewhat disappointing 2023 campaign, are eager to bounce back. The addition of key players, the development of their young talent, and the health of their core veterans will determine how far they go. The AFC West is no longer a walk in the park. Teams like Kansas City, Denver, and the Chargers have all upgraded their rosters. So, every game counts, and having a solid, healthy defensive line could be the difference between making the playoffs or watching from home. And with that in mind, the Raiders' front office and coaching staff are under pressure to make smart moves now, whether that's through trades, signings, or draft picks. They need to address the depth issues on the defensive line, especially considering the uncertainty surrounding Wilkins. If they manage to bring in the right players and get everyone healthy, the Raiders could surprise a lot of folks this season. But if injuries continue to pile up, they might find themselves in a tough spot. So, Raiders fans, this story is still unfolding, and the coming weeks will be crucial. Will Wilkins recover fully and return to his dominant form? Or will the Raiders need to look elsewhere for help? The trade market is always active, and teams are constantly adjusting their rosters. The Raiders have some talented options, whether it's Joseph Day, Smith, or even a draft prospect, to fill that interior defensive line hole. The key will be how quickly they can get these players integrated and whether their young guys can step up. And now, Las Vegas Raiders fans, I want to hear from you. What's your take on all these developments? Do you believe Wilkins will bounce back strongly this season? Or do you think the team needs to be aggressive in acquiring new talent? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Your opinion genuinely matters, and it's so important for our community. I'll be back soon with more updates, so stay tuned, keep the faith, and let's keep supporting our Raiders through thick and thin. This season might have its challenges, but with the right moves, a little luck, and that Raiders spirit, anything is possible. Thanks for watching, and as always, go Raiders!